All right, so today is going to be a really lengthy video, and it might even be broken up into two parts because I just don't think there's any way possible to do this, even one video in under 2 hours. And this is something that's really near and dear to my heart because I've worked in the medical field for so many years and just seen how chronic disease can wreak havoc on people's and families' lives. And there's a lot of research out there on chronic disease, but I haven't found any research on why. There's a lot of theory, but I don't necessarily equate that to research. But I'm just going to throw some stuff out there and let me know what you think. And I'm going to title this Understanding the Rise of Chronic Disease in America. And I've got a million windows up in here because I don't want to forget anything, but I want to share with you a couple of statistics, facts, whatever, relevant research that is important before we kick this off. So, and you know this probably without me even having to share this with you, but the rates of chronic conditions like heart disease, asthma, cancer, and diabetes have grown. Are you ready for this? 700% since 1935. And today, 6 in 10 Americans have a chronic disease. Now, just because it's chronic just means it's been existing for a long time. Acute is like, oh my God, I broke my leg. That's an acute injury. Whereas again, chronic means over the course of time. And most of these are largely preventable. That's to me is what is so freaking mind numbing. And throughout this video, I'm going to be tossing up uh, some graphs and statistics that I found. And as always, in the description, I'm going to leave all of my references regarding the research that I've uncovered. So this is what's kind of frightening to me. And like I said, you probably know this. So collectively, as Americans, we're smoking less, we're drinking less, hard to believe, well, maybe with the exception of during COVID, but drinking less, meaning less alcohol. We're exercising more and we're eating more healthy as compared to previous decades. And when I say more healthy, I mean more fruits and vegetables, more whole foods, more non-inflammatory grains, and less saturated fat and sodium. And mostly saturated fat is going to come from animal products, just so you know. All right. So if we're doing all of these things right, why do rates of chronic disease and obesity still surge? I mean, they're way beyond what they were years ago. So how did we reach a point? And I'm not going to answer this for you. You know, you can answer it within your own head, but how did we reach a point where 60% of the population suffers from one or more chronic diseases, where life expectancy is declining and 40% of individuals are not only overweight, but clinically obese? How? Especially in the face of modern Western medicine, where health span, and I'll put the chart here, I'm sorry, lifespan is increasing and health span is shortening. And a statistic that I've recently uncovered is that I think our lifespan, which just means how long we live, period, how long we live, that's our lifespan. And our health span is how long we live healthy, without disease, without infirmary, without being in a facility long term, and without a slow death disease, chronic disease. So how did we get to that point? Seriously, I believe in America, and again, I don't have it here, so I'll have to look for it once I'm done with the video, but I'll certainly put it here now. Lifespan is, it's either 79.2 or 8, I believe it's 89.2. So we're living on average of 89 years. But our health span, meaning without disease, is 69 and change. So what does that mean? That we are living 20% of our life with some sort of chronic slow death disease, neurodegenerative, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, ALS, um, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, and that's an umbrella for so many different things: hyperinsulinemia, hyperglycemia, type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and then cancer. I mean, how? Lifespan is getting longer, but health span is getting shorter. To me, that's a huge concern. And by the time we get to the end of this, and it may be one video and it may be two, but based on all of the research and all of the graphs that I'm going to throw up, you're going to go, holy shit, how is this even possible? But historically, widespread chronic diseases, they haven't been prevalent. I mean, we haven't. Back in the 30s, 7.5% of us faced a long-term chronic disease or disability, meaning a slow death disease, and the four I just mentioned. So fast forward to the year 2000, and that figure has risen to 45%, just 2000. And then just 4 years ago, it's up from 45 to 60%. And I couldn't find anything to modern day, which is 2024. But so we went from 7.5% to, what did I say, 45%, and then up to 60% for chronic slow death diseases. How is that even possible? And here's the graph that I'm talking about regarding that. So I did briefly touch on it a second ago, but let's define what a chronic disease is. And if we're going to go based on the CDC definition, is chronic diseases are ongoing and generally speaking, incurable conditions, which include heart disease, cancer, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and did I say cancer and heart disease? Yes. So, and I disagree with the CDC as far as incurable. I don't believe that. Some cancers certainly have proven to be incurable, like multiple myeloma, which my father happened to pass away from. But every other cancer has been cured. So I don't agree with the incurable condition, but I do agree with the preventable condition. Absolutely. And despite a constant trend upward in chronic disease over the past century, it's been particularly concerning since 2000. And what I mean by that is from 2000 to 2010, middle-aged adults, that's probably you, and it's definitely me, with chronic ailments has jumped from 16% to 21%. And then by 2014, it reached 32%. And today, 40% of adults, 40% have multiple chronic diseases. And that actually holds true for personal experience. When I worked in the ER and I was seeing multiple patients, hundreds of patients per week, a lot of them were frequent flyers. And that's the term in the medical industry for someone that you see on a constant basis, a repeat basis, a frequent flyer. And that's absolutely correct. If they came in for stomach pain, they also had, obviously, GI distress. They had diabetes. They had some sort of cardiovascular disease, whatever form it presented in. I don't know, it can be multiple forms, but probably had high blood pressure. And every single one of them that had comorbidities, meaning multiple chronic diseases, had bags of medications, bags. So the problem with that, and I did another video on this. Actually, I think it was a podcast with my friend, our podcast, Fit with Purpose. And we used to do this, and I used to do this on another platform, and I need to get all of my videos transferred over here to YouTube, which is what I'm doing now. But some research has changed, so I'm just trying to redo videos as I go. But um, the long story short, there's a disconnect in our approach to health. I think that's obvious, and that's something that all of us concerned about health span and lifespan can agree upon. So the CDC, this is not me, and I certainly I don't agree with. I do agree with all of them, but I think they are including, but not limited to. So they certainly include all of these factors, but it's not the only reasons. So again, CDC identifies four main factors to contributing to chronic disease: tobacco use, lack of physical activity, yes, alcohol consumption, and poor nutrition. So let's ask, if we have a rising rate of these chronic diseases, one might assume, right, that factors, the risk factors are also increasing. But that's not the case. And I want to go deeper into that, into each factor to better understand what we're talking about here, understand the situation. So let's start with the first one, tobacco use. So they have significantly decreased over the past 60 years, plummeting from 45% in 1954 to about 13.5% today. And here's the graph that indicates that. And remember the old school days when all the Marlboro guy, the Marlboro man would be on TV on his horse with his cowboy hat and smoking cigarettes. Remember those days? I even had a friend who was the Marlboro man. Kevin Dodge, if you're out there, you were the loveliest Marlboro man ever. Look him up, and he's still beautiful. And he is a saltwater photographer. So if you are into saltwater fishing, and you see this big sailfish on the cover of the magazine, more than likely that's Kevin Dodge, not the sailfish, but taking the picture. All right, so if tobacco use is a prime contributor to chronic disease and its prevalence is dropping according to the graph that I just showed you, why are we still having chronic disease rates, but yet the prevalence of smoking is dropping? So even as fewer people smoke, cancer rates are continuing to climb. And here's the graph that indicates that. So even though it's reassuring to think about how, let's see, how do I want to say that, how health outcomes would be worse if smoking rates were still high, but it suggests that collectively, we have made lifestyle changes that could be exacerbating our health issues. I mean, that's kind of common sense, right? Or is it just me? No, it's not. It's not just me. Okay, let's go to number two, lack of physical activity. So the CDC points to physical inactivity as another contributor to chronic disease. And they recommend at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week. So contrary to what they think or you think or most people think, Americans are truly exercising more now than they were 2 decades ago. And here is the graph to prove it. So in 1998, 40.2% of adults met those physical activity guidelines of 150 minutes per week. And in 2018, that number had gone up to 54%. So if overall physical activity has gone up, that's not the primary driver in chronic disease. Again, that's an axiom. It's an obvious truth. People are moving more. I mean, I get they have more sedentary jobs, but overall, they are getting 150 hours, 150 minutes per week of exercising. So overall physical activity has gone up. not down, but yet chronic disease rates are rising. All right. So the CDC saying that 4 main factors contribute to chronic disease. To me, we've already debunked the first 2. Alcohol use has gone down. Lack of physical activity has gone up. Excessive alcohol consumption. I wouldn't even say necessarily that is a primary driver. Well, I suppose it could be. Anyway, so let's talk about alcohol consumption, excessive alcohol consumption. So if we look at this over the past decade, recent studies, again, just the past decade, indicate that Americans, excuse me, over the past several decades show that caloric intake from alcohol has been relatively stable. I mean, you have this and you have this and you have this and you have this, but there's not this and there's not this. And here's the graph that shows that. And actually, since 1980s, it's been dropping. The daily calorie intake from alcohol has been steadily dropping since the 80s. So it was 185 calories per person on average in the 1980s, and it dropped in 2017 to 161 calories. So given this data, common sense tells us that it's difficult to attribute the rising chronic disease rates primarily to alcohol consumption. So CDC, I believe you're wrong on that one as well. All right, so their fourth one is poor nutrition. Obviously, this remains, always has been, and still is. It remains a key area of concern. So recent studies indicate that Americans might be eating healthier in the past, which means they have an increased intake of high quality carbs, not the packaged crap, not the sugar laden stuff, but high quality plant proteins and whole grains and whole quality foods and unsaturated fats, along with, which is incredible, a reduced amount of added sugar. And here's the graph that shows that. But yet, obesity rates have surged by nearly 40%. Here's the graph since 1999, countering that notion that healthier diets correlate with positive health outcomes. So we're eating better, we're drinking less alcohol, we're exercising more, but chronic disease rates are going up. That doesn't make any sense. Why is that? Well, that's the purpose of this video. So if we examine our diet over the past several decades, obviously we find a significant increase in the consumption of processed foods, particularly those high in sugar and vegetable oils. And what I mean by that is since the 60s, the 1960s, our intake of sugar and sweeteners has increased by 88 calories a day, while vegetable oil consumption has skyrocketed to not 100, 423 calories a day. And here's the graph. This is the trend here, guys, in daily calories from major food groups. Look at this. This speaks volumes. So to recap that, sugar and sweeteners has increased by 88 calories per day since the 60s per person, of course. On average, I know not everyone eats sugar. I get that. But vegetable oil consumptions has skyrocketed to 423 calories a day. What the hell? So I guess what I'm trying to say is the noteworthy aspect of dietary changes over this time frame is 150-fold increase in vegetable oil consumption, mainly, wait for it, I've been chomping at the bit to say this word, mainly from seed oils, which coincide with the rising rates of chronic diseases. And we're going to get really deep into seed oils. And I have no idea how long this video even is yet. I'm going to say, I don't even have a timer. I don't even know. But I'm going to go a little bit further and then see how far I have left to go and probably make this part 1 of 2. But so before we dive deep into seed oils, let's talk about grains and sugar. And people say, oh my God, sugar is poison. Grains are poison. They're inflammatory. Yes, they are. They are inflammatory, as is sugar. But hold on. Let's back up a second. So we just said that our consumption of sugar and grains has increased significantly since the 60s. And according to this graph, we're actually eating fewer calories from grains and sugar than in the 1990s. But yet obesity and diabetes continue to climb. And I think it's worth noting, it absolutely is worth noting, that sugar has been directly linked to rising rates of diabetes. But we're actually eating fewer calories, according to this graph, fewer calories. Guys, this is huge. We're actually eating fewer calories from grains and sugar than in 1990s, but yet the rates of obesity and diabetes continue to climb. Okay, so in 1987, we're consuming 871 calories from grains, 651 from sugar, compared to 812 and 603 calories today, respectively. So less in both categories, down, 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 down. So if grains and sugar are the primary drivers of chronic disease, wouldn't we expect better health outcomes in the past couple of decades as their consumption decreased? Of course we would, but we're not seeing that. Diabetes has particularly surged since 1997, actually doubled. And like I said before, there's been clinical trials, there's been studies that indicate excessive sugar is harmful. No question about it. No question about it. And eliminating carbs and grains can, we know this, you know this, if you have diabetes and if you've done it, you've seen your A1C level be reduced. You can reduce and manage your diabetic situation by reducing carbs and grains, no doubt about it. But that data does not demonstrate that societal decline in grains and sugars affect overall chronic disease rates. The evidence, the research, the trends, the data is there. And it doesn't mean, please, 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 it doesn't, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that sugar intake has no role in contributing to chronic disease. It just simply suggests that it's not the primary driver influencing the slow death chronic conditions. It's not. It absolutely is not. How can it be if sugar and grains intake was here as a society and disease was whatever it was, and now sugar and grain consumption is here, but yet disease has increased? Be careful what you believe. All right, so people say, all right, Cameron, it's got to be red meat. It's got to be animal fat. It's got to be saturated fat. Well, let's just go back for a second. Way back in 1980, the first, it's hard to believe that just seems like yesterday, but the first dietary guidelines call for less saturated fat, less cholesterol, and less sodium, because they were the cause why people were dropping dead, as evidenced by this graph right here. This is a consumption graph for saturated fat, which is mostly animal fat. So interestingly enough, Americans were surprisingly good at listening to these dietary guidelines. And as a result of, they're like, oh, okay, maybe based on what I'm getting fed on the TV here, I need to reduce consumption of animal-based foods, red meat and salt. So what is that? High in saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium. So they did. And those consumption of animal products have not increased in recent decades. Again, here's the graph. So what does that mean? Same as everything else that I just told you about. It's very, very unlikely that they're the culprits in driving the increasingly poor health that we've seen increase over the last 50 years. And as a matter of fact, consumption of saturated fats, animal products, has actually gone down. And I suspect that is probably for a couple of different reasons. You know, the there's a really big movement right now, which I'm an advocate of, but we want to protect the environment. So eat lab grown meat, wherever the hell that is, I don't even know, but eat your fake meat, and uh, it helps the environment. And again, I suspect that's why consumption in one reason why consumption of red meat and saturated fat has gone down, because of environmental concerns. And they're constantly bombarding with, still, be careful what you eat, and not so much on, oh, excuse me. Ugh, excuse me. I could probably edit that out, but I'm not going to. Full steam ahead, baby. And not so much you see it anymore on commercials or on TV, but you do still see it. If you go to the American Heart Association, they tell you to eat X number of grams per day in red meat, but limit your amount of that saturated fat, which is good. I still do that. And here's a graph that indicates plant food consumption versus animal food consumption. Excuse me. So we've talked about a number of different factors, according to the CDC, that have been implicated in chronic disease and slow disease deaths. So let's talk about a couple of other factors. And I'm going to use that fun term again, seed oils. Unlike red meat and other dietary factors that have been scrutinized and vilified in any health discussion, vegetable oils have gone, largely, truly, they've flown under the radar. Not many people are having that conversation until lately. But did you know that they now contribute, and again, it's a soybean oil, canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, there's rice bran oil. So they now contribute to 700 calories per day to the average American diet, which is about 20%. If you eat the average, whatever, let me do the 2,500 calories a day. So if you take a look at this graph that shows the frightening upward trajectory in the consumption of vegetable oils, truly look at this. Bam. Crazy, crazy consumption of vegetable oils. Well, why is that? Because they're freaking cheap. They're cheap to produce, even though what goes into processing this, and I'm going to go into that in a second, it's so extensive. It's still cheaper to produce that and wash it, deodorize it, shake it, strip it apart, put it back together, and package it and send it out than it is to press olive oil. There is no processing in olive oil. You squeeze the olive, you get the oil, boom, done. But while we've mostly operative word, mostly adhere to public health advice about, like I said, reducing saturated fat, animal products, and sodium, and increasing fruits and vegetables, so eating better, chronic disease rates continue to worsen. Guys, do you understand the implications of this? They are lying to you. Be careful what you put in your mouth. All right. So, like I mentioned a minute ago, there's 150-fold increase in vegetable oil consumption over the past 100 years, and mainly from seed oils, mainly. And that directly correlates to the rates of chronic disease increase. Here's the graph. This is a big one. So what does all of that mean? That means it is time to reconsider the narrative surrounding chronic disease. So if vegetable oil is the unseen antagonist in our growing health crisis, and I think we can all agree that it's a growing health crisis, we have to bring this to light. We have to. So the ongoing battle against red meat and saturated fat and salt and sugar, I mean, they have detracted from a much, much more significant health challenge lurking in the shadows, which is seed oils. So my conclusion is this. While multiple factors, and I'm not saying that if you have a chronic disease, if you have heart disease or cardiovascular disease, or if you have cancer or Alzheimer's or any of that, I'm not saying that there is one reason. There is not. Multiple factors contribute to chronic disease epidemic, but the rise of vegetable oils warrants further exploration. I mean, their pervasive presence in our diets, coupled with, you saw the charts, the declining trends in smoking and alcohol and eating better and exercising more. Doesn't it suggest that vegetable oil, seed oils might, operative word, might be a central piece of a much larger concerning public health crisis? Of course it does. It's just common sense. So I think it's time that we shift our focus and truly critically examine the role of seed oils in our ongoing health crisis. Because guys, when you enter into the current healthcare system, unless you have an acute situation, you break a bone, you get in a car accident, we're really good. Modern medicine is really good at fixing you and getting you back out the door. But if you enter the system with a chronic slow death disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, or neurodegenerative diseases, cancer, metabolic issues, you really, really struggle with exiting alive. That's the problem. So we have got to shift our focus. And even though that's my conclusion, that's just my personal belief based on the research that I've done. But now I would like to talk about the risk of seed oils in our diet. And what I'd like to go over is, really what are they? And why are they so dangerous? For me, when I first found out about seed oils, oh, that's interesting, but they're not good for your health. But why? I want to know why. I want to know the why behind everything. And we're going to talk about what are seed oils, what is their makeup within their makeup that makes them so dangerous, how are they processed, are they stable, are they unstable, do they start off stable, do they become unstable, do they start off unstable and stay that way? What is going on with seed oils? And then we're going to talk about their direct effect on our health and what is happening within your body when you consume a seed oil. So I'm going to save that for part number 2. Again, I don't have a timer. I'm going to guess we're going on 45 minutes, but stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to dive even deeper into seed oils. And as always, thank y'all so much for watching, and like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want me to research and make a video on. And as always, I appreciate you guys, and I will see you soon. See you next time. Bye.